Southeast Asia against US unpredictability and Chinese assertiveness is something that I think we could explore. And regional cooperation would be a very strong part of that. Thank you.
Next. Thank you, sir. There are 3 or 4 questions particularly asked to Dr. Panda. So Dr. Panda, these are the questions for you particularly. What are the areas India can showcase its leadership or lead in the present scenario in the Indo-Pacific is the one. The second one is, when you say China's policy in Indo-Pacific is more structural, could you elaborate on what you mean in terms of structural? Does structural change not mean reordering of power by focusing its policy on US? And the third one, what are the strategic interests of China involved in militarization process in Indian Ocean region? Thank you. So these are 3 particular questions right now for you. If there's a time, we'll take it up the later next set of questions. Over to you. Unmute and then.
Yeah. Can you hear me now? Okay. Yeah. Excellent questions. Let me first address that point, that questions about China's policy in Indo-Pacific is more structural. Now, what do I mean by structural? Of course, this is one thing to say that it is linked with reordering the power configuration, particularly if we take into account China's relationship with US, the power rivalry that exists. So that means they do want to influence the order of the power in the regions. So you are absolutely right. But I think when I say structural, it means a lot of other things. One is that the Chinese are for a long time trying to save the nature of the regions, nature of the world politics, where the focus has been on Indo-Pacific. Even though concept of Indo-Pacific is in use for last 4 to 5 years, but for a long time, they have been talking about the nature of world politics. And if you see the Chinese writings, the publications which is coming from 2002 to 2003 onwards, immediately after the 9/11 incident, they have been talking about how the Americans are trying to still shape a unipolar world. So the Chinese attempt has been either go for a multipolar world structure or go for eventually a bipolar world structure. So that means when I say structural, China's approach to Indo-Pacific is structural. That means one of the critical point, apart from the reordering of the power point that you have raised, is to save the nature of the world politics, which is focused on Indo-Pacific. Number 3 point is that I think the Chinese, when they say that their perception about Indo-Pacific is much more structural, when we say that, we also mean that the Chinese are trying to save the nature of the institutions. You see, if we see the nature of the institutions in Indo-Pacific, 10 years back, we were not having any financial institutions except Asia Development Bank from Asian region or from these regions, from the Indo-Pacific regions. Today we have AIIB, we have New Development Bank. In some ways we could say that these are actually the origins of Chinese or Asians or the Indo-Pacific regions in some ways what the Chinese are trying to push it. So it is also reordering of the institutions, global norms and all. The other point is, which is very critical, is that the Chinese are actually talking about a reordering of the networks. Now, if you see these networks, this is very interesting because this has to be seen in context of how the Chinese foreign policy has emerged. Chinese foreign policy 2 decades back started focusing a lot on 2 regions. One was Central Asia, the other one was on Northeast Asia. Today, their prime focus has shifted towards South Asia, towards Indian Ocean regions, focusing with the Southeast Asian regions. So therefore, they have seen a chain of networks with the countries in these regions in their perception towards Indo-Pacific. So I conclude by saying to these questions that you are right that they talk about reordering of power, but there are other points attached to it. One, that they talk about shaping the nature of the world politics with focusing Indo-Pacific. They also talk about reordering the institutions, bringing the institutions they are trying to push to the prime of world politics, BAIB to New Development Bank. Even the New Development Bank is really not an important bank in comparison to AIIB. But if we do see in a current context, in the last 3 to 4 years trajectory of AIIB, it has emerged as a significant bank. We have 102 international members attached to this bank. So that talks about the Chinese approach towards the regions. Third is the network in the regions. Their networks towards the Indo-Pacific has shifted with a lot of focus on South Asia, with a lot of focus on Southeast Asia. So their power perception is very much sub-region centric. The other question is about India's leadership. What leadership role India could play? A lot of, as I said, this is a period of opportunity. It leaves India in a great space to take advantage of the situation. One advantage we could possibly take is in the multilateral institutions. Multilateral institutions, those which are critical to global governance issues, be it WHO, where we have now secured the chairmanship in the WHO, be it other institutions, UN affiliated institutions, which are actually talking about global governance issues, because now there is a backlash against the Chinese issues, the Chinese goods, the kind of policies and the plans the Chinese pursue towards the different parts of the world. So India can actually launch its own soft power diplomacy and take advantage in these institutions. The second point is that I think India should also aim to take advantage and a leadership role probably in the Indian Ocean regions. And that's, I think, very critical, because only last month we have secured an observer membership in Indian Ocean Commission. All this while we were not there, but that is very critical. If we try to link in the PAN network on the Indo-Pacific regions. Actually, Prime Minister Modi last year talked about Indian Ocean Indo-Pacific Ocean initiatives. And we have been talking about an inclusive construct in Indo-Pacific. So that means all of our propositions are talking about an inclusive construct of Indo-Pacific, where India can take a lead in some of these plans and proposals, be it supply chain networks, be it protecting the sea line of communications, or try to take a leadership role in the maritime governance institutions, be it Indian Ocean Rim Association, or be it Indian Ocean Commission. The other question was, I think, about the China's strategic interest in militarizing the Indian Ocean region. I think a lot of strategic objectives are attached to China. One is, of course, for a long time they were trying to overcome the Malacca dilemma, as we know, but that has been an issue of the past. To some extent, the Chinese have actually come out with alternative networks. So Malacca dilemma is an old issue for the Chinese. They're not really that much worried about. There is a misconception in India and in some of the regions, in some of our regions, that the Chinese are actually worried about the Malacca dilemma. They have backup plans. Now they have stationing points where they could actually operate in the Indian Ocean. They have alternative dwelling points in Indian Ocean regions. I have prepared a map where actually in the last 10, 12 years, they have established more than 25 establishments all across the Indian Ocean regions. So that actually talks about their backup plan as far as Malacca dilemma is concerned. But I think there are other objectives the Chinese are talking about for a long time. One, they are trying to take advantage of their military outreach and strategic outreach in the Pacific regions. Pacific region is critical to China because of the Taiwan issue and because of their rivalry with Japan. If they try to have a good inroads in Pacific regions with the Pacific Island countries, then they can be in an upper hand as far as controlling Taiwan or occupying Taiwan is concerned at some point, and also challenging the US-Japan supremacy in the regions. Let's not forget, the Japanese are terrified because of the Chinese, rising military and strategic quest in the Pacific Island countries. So that is one objective they are trying to secure. The other one is, I think this has been a very long-run Chinese objective. If you see the entire Indo-Pacific regions, there are more than 1,000 military, smaller or bigger military establishments that the US is having in the entire Indo-Pacific regions. The Chinese are trying to challenge that supremacy of the Americans for a long time. So it will take another 1 decade, but we'll see that slowly the Chinese will be actually matching the American supremacy, if not overcoming or dominating the Americans, but they would be in a position to at least pose a strong challenge to the American military supremacy in the Indo-Pacific. That's the key objective of the Chinese military. The third point is, I think, is the India factor, because it has been a long quest for the Chinese to challenge the Indian naval supremacy in the Indian Ocean regions. And if you see the Chinese literatures, they have been continuously talking about that how India considers that Indian Ocean belongs to India. It has been named after India. So it has been a long-term Chinese objective to challenge the Indian supremacy in the Indian Ocean regions. I'll stop here. Thank you.
Thank you, Jagannath. There are two particular questions to Dr. Pankaj. So now I will read it out. So Pankaj can answer very briefly to this. Then there are other questions which are open-ended. Any panelist can